Las Vegas Raiders player Carl Nassib coming out and saying he owes much of it to his coaches and fellow players in the NFL. We'll talk about what an important step forward his actions are next.
My house here in Westchester, Pennsylvania. Just want to take a quick moment to say that I'm gay. I've been meaning to do this for a while now, but I finally feel comfortable enough to get it off my chest. I really have the best life. I got the best family, friends, and job a guy could ask for. I'm a pretty private person, so I hope you guys know that I'm really not doing this for attention. I just think that representation and visibility are so important. I actually hope that one day videos like this and the whole coming out process are just not necessary. But until then, I'm going to do my best and do my part to cultivate a culture that's accepting, that's compassionate.
An historic moment, a really, really important one. We were listening to Carl Nassib, a defensive end for the Las Vegas Raiders, who's also now the first openly gay active player in the NFL. As part of that video, he announced a $100,000 donation to the Trevor Project. The Trevor Project, of course, a nonprofit, focuses on preventing LGBTQ suicide. Joining us now, retired player Wade Davis. He's one of a handful of players who came out after leaving the NFL. He's then worked with the NFL and other professional sports leagues for several years on LGBTQ issues. I've seen some of your interviews, and I'd really like to hear from you about the importance to young players, or maybe some young players who aspire to play in the NFL and have this example, this touchstone now.
Yeah, so Carl offers us a model, right, for what it looks like to love yourself unapologetically. But he also offers a model for non-gay players for what it means to also be accepting. Because here's the flip of the coin, right? LGBTQ folks aren't looking for heterosexual folks to accept us. It's the inverse that needs to happen, right? Like, we are standing in our truth. We are standing in the love for ourselves. So it's actually the work of heterosexual folks to show up differently so that we will actually embrace and accept them, right? It is not us that was afraid to own our sexuality. The world that they have built said that if we choose to own our truth, if we choose to openly identify as gay, that they will hurt us, that they will create harm, right? So I just want us to kind of flip the paradigm to say, what is the work of heterosexual people to ensure that more Carl Nassibs happen?
You talked about, I think in that vein, the intersection of sexism and homophobia. Explain that.
Yeah, so when I was a player, I didn't hear a lot of homophobic language. What I heard was a lot of sexist language. And from reading amazing feminists like Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde, I learned that the root of homophobia was sexism, right? That some men want to distance themselves as far as they can from what it might mean to be feminine. And what they also do is portray or want to see individuals who identify as LGBT as similar to women. And we don't have a problem with that. It's them that actually think that it's less than if you comport yourself in ways that may be historically identified as feminine. So again, the work is on the heterosexual folks, and specifically men, to think through, what is it about me that makes me so insecure that if someone might see the way that I perform a certain type of masculinity, right, that I am read as less than?
What role, the NFL has just, since we've been on the air, announced that it will match Carl's donation to the Trevor Project, seeming to say the right things about standing with him and making the same contribution to the organization he singled out yesterday. What more can the NFL do in this moment? What opportunity does the league have?
So one, it has the responsibility, not the opportunity, to make sure that their players, their coaches, their owners, right, are educated on what it means to create an inclusive environment. Two, their players, owners, and coaches have the opportunity to talk about what they have learned from Carl, right? What it means to be a courageous individual, right? And what it means to be someone who identifies as a man, right? And not just because Carl is gay, but because Carl did something that so many of us don't have the courage to do. He chose to love himself without apology. That's the real learning. And Carl's helping to redefine what it means to be a man. And those are the stories that I want to hear coaches say. I want to hear how players, what they have learned from from Carl, because what they then do is they help to redefine for young kids who are watching Carl and who are watching the NFL understand that there's a large spectrum, right, in what it means to identify as a man or a woman or trans or non-binary.
What would you guess the reception was, positive and negative from his teammates and other players in the league right now? Where is the league?
I'm pretty confident that Carl did a decent analysis of his teammates and the organization, that I don't imagine that Carl is going to have much trouble. Carl is not the person who we should be worried about. When you step into your truth, when you show the world that you love yourself, right? Like, you're already okay. Like you've done the hardest work that can ever be done as a human being, right? The work is actually on everyone else to figure out, like, how do I do the same? How do I not let Carl do this alone? Like, how do I see him as someone who I can model myself after? So the NFL has an opportunity to tell a larger conversation also about how what Carl did is connected to what other players have done around BLM, how what women have done in the Women's March. Like, all of these movements aren't singular, they're connected. And that's the larger story that we need to be telling.
It's so important. It's so neat when some of the biggest stories of the day It's so important. It's so neat when some of the biggest stories of the day do not come from our nation's political leaders. It's really great to talk to you about it. Wade Davis, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. It's a great conversation. I hope you'll come back often.